This is Radio Romania International. You are listening to our one-hour broadcast in English for listeners in Western Europe and Japan. We can also be heard on the internet at www.rri.ro Channel 1. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter and other social media platforms. Our programs are also available on TuneIn and via satellite Eutelsat 16A on 11,512 MHz vertical polarization, azimuth 16 degrees east. Symbol rate 29,950 megasymbols per second, standard DVB-S2, modulation 8 PSK, audio PID 510. We wish you good reception conditions. Hello, this is Daniel Bills with the news, the headlines. Romania's infection rate with the novel coronavirus continues to go down, the entire country being in the green tire now. The G7 leaders are meeting in Cornwall in southeast England to discuss the global crisis triggered by the pandemic and climate change. And postponed because of the pandemic, the European Football Championship got underway on Friday in Italy, the first country in Europe to be hit hard by the pandemic. Hello, this is Daniel Bills with the news, the headlines. Romania's infection rate with the novel coronavirus continues to go down, the entire country being in the green tire now. The G7 leaders are meeting in Cornwall in southeast England to discuss the global crisis triggered by the pandemic and climate change. And postponed because of the pandemic, the European Football Championship got underway on Friday in Italy, the first country in Europe to be hit hard by the pandemic. Romania's infection rate with the novel coronavirus continues to go down, the entire country being in the green tire. 103 new cases were reported on Friday, and the authorities have announced 150 new fatalities, 20 of them in the past 24 hours. 1,300 patients are being treated in hospitals, 255 of them in intensive care. Since the vaccine rollout kicked off in December 2020, 4.1 million people in Romania have been fully vaccinated. Andrei Baciu, State Secretary with the Health Ministry, has announced that the European Digital Certificate for COVID-19 is to become operational in Romania on July the 1st. The digital certificate is a proof of the fact that a person has been vaccinated, tested negative, or had the disease. G7 leaders are meeting in Cornwall in southeast England to discuss the global crisis triggered by the pandemic and climate change. The UK, which is holding the group's annual presidency, has announced that 1 billion doses of COVID vaccine will be donated to poorer nations, following calls from international charity and health organizations. The UK presidency also wishes to urge pharmaceutical companies to provide vaccines on a non-for-profit basis during the pandemic, after the model of Oxford AstraZeneca. G7 leaders will also discuss mechanisms to prevent future pandemics. This is their first face-to-face meeting in almost 2 years, with the host country beefing up security to prepare for the protests that usually accompany G7 summits. Postponed because of the pandemic, the European Football Championship got underway on Friday in Italy, the first country in Europe to be hit hard by the pandemic. The opening match Italy versus Turkey was held on the Stadio Olimpico in Rome, which was 20% full. With a final tournament hosted by 19 countries for the first time in its history, epidemiological rules vary from one nation to another. In countries in Eastern Europe, stadiums operate at 50% capacity and even 100% in Budapest. In Western Europe, the authorities are more cautious, and health authorities in Bavaria, in Germany, only allowed for 20% of seats in the Munich stadium to be occupied. The first Bucharest will also host 4 matches. During the first 3, the city's national arena will operate at 25% capacity, while for the 4th match, from the round of last 16, 25,000 spectators will be allowed on the stadium, accounting for half of its capacity. The national arena will be hosting the following matches: Austria versus North Macedonia on the 13th of June, Ukraine versus North Macedonia on the 17th of June, and Ukraine versus Austria on the 21st of June in Group C. And a match as part of the round of last 16 on the 28th of June. Romania will also have 2 teams of referees, which is another first for Romanian football in a final tournament. The European Public Prosecutor's Office is not an external institution, but one in the service of the EU citizens. The European Chief Prosecutor, Laura Codruța-Kövesi, said in Sofia on Friday during her first visit since the beginning of the EPPO's public activity. We are at home in all the member states participating in EPPO. We are here for you, and we want to earn your trust through our work, the EU official went on to say in the last day of her visit to Bulgaria. According to her, all people are equal when it comes to law, and the EPPO is not going to make any differences between those it is investigating. And that was the news.
The state of alert in Romania has been extended by another 30 days, starting Saturday. I'm Vlad Palcu with a report by Ștefan Stoica. The government in Bucharest this week voted for an extension of the state of alert in Romania by another 30 days. Maintaining the state of alert despite the improving epidemiological situation will allow the authorities to quickly intervene if things take a different turn. Football fans also received a piece of good news. The match hosted by Romania in the round of 16 at Euro 2020 will be held with a 50% crowd attendance. Additionally, open-air events and election rallies will be allowed with a maximum attendance of 1,000 people. Moreover, the number of people allowed to attend private events has also been increased to 200 for restaurants with indoor seating, while observing the minimum 2-meter distance between people. All relaxation measures introduced in early June will be maintained. Therefore, up to 1,000 people can now attend cultural, artistic and entertainment events in open areas, provided people can prove they are vaccinated, they have had the disease or are COVID-free. The new limit can be exceeded for participants who also provide similar certificates. The number of people attending indoor events has also increased from 50% to 70% capacity, allowing for up to 100% capacity for people who also provide proof of vaccination or that they had the disease. Gyms are now open at 70% capacity, and the number of people can increase here as well, again for those providing proof of vaccination. Accommodation units made available on the Romanian sea coast has also increased. Bars, clubs, nightclubs and gambling outlets remain open between 5 in the morning and midnight, with 50% maximum capacity only for vaccinated people. Starting June the 1st, masks are no longer compulsory in offices with a maximum of 5 vaccinated employees, but remains compulsory in other shared areas. In other news, Great Britain is now the only European country still included in the so-called red area of countries presenting an epidemiological risk.
The 2021 Lux Audience Award presented by the European Parliament was won by the Romanian film Collective. I'm Mihaela Ignatescu with more in this report by Roxana Vasile. These days, from Strasbourg to Cannes, Romanian films are enjoying unanimous recognition, a fact that has become quite natural for audiences in the country and abroad. For years, there's been talk of the new wave, represented by unanimously appreciated and awarded filmmakers such as Cristian Mungiu, Cristi Puiu, Radu Muntean, Corneliu Porumboiu, Radu Jude or Adina Pintilie. Let us add to this gallery of names that of Alexander Nanau, whose film Collective has recently received the Lux Audience Award presented by the European Parliament and the European Film Academy in partnership with the European Commission and Europa Cinemas. The winner is decided both by audience vote and by the vote of the MEPs, each having a share of 50% in the final decision. Upon accepting the award, Alexander Nanau paid tribute to the victims and families involved in the tragedy at the Collective Club, as well as to the independent press that investigated the case. The film follows a group of local journalists exploring corruption in the Romanian healthcare system, following a dramatic event that shook the country in 2015. On October 30th, a fire in the improvised Collective nightclub in Bucharest, hosted by a former factory, results in 65 dead and about 200 injured. Some of the injured are transported for medical care abroad. Others, left in the country, die due to severe burns and also from infections acquired in hospital. Social discontent is escalating. Street protests are taking place, and the Prime Minister resigns. Following in parallel journalists, victims and government officials, Alexander Nanau's documentary talks about the revival of civic responsibility and the need for unbiased journalism in a democratic world. We want to fight corruption, and we want a free press in Europe. Societies do not evolve if we do not have culture, education and the free press, Nanau said upon receiving the Lux Award. With this recognition, Alexander Nanau's investigative documentary rounds up an outstanding year after winning several international awards and making history, becoming the first Romanian film nominated for the Oscars in the Best Documentary and Best International Feature Film categories. As the 74th edition of the Cannes International Film Festival, to be held between July the 6th and the 17th, is already on the horizon, we should also mention that the feature film Întregalde, directed by Radu Muntean, and the short film When Night Meets Dawn by Andreea Cristina Borțun were selected in the Quinzaine de Réalisateurs section. Andrei Epure's short reel Intercom 15 will compete in the Semaine de la Critique section, whose jury will be led by Cristian Mungiu. And the feature film La Civil, a Romanian-Belgian-Mexican co-production, directed by Teodora Ana Mihai and co-produced by Cristian Mungiu, was selected in the competition of the Un Certain Regard section.
Coming up next on Radio Romania International, listen to Song of the Day. The band Vang, featuring Ioana Ignat, will be performing the song called The Last Announcement.
Dar ei nu știu că trupul tău, că nu e al meu să ține rândeci. Sunt un bun, dar tot te aștept la mic dejun. Banii tău amestecat, să ne iubim fără să fim mâncați. Nu spune tare. Știi bine că nu pot. Aruncă-mă într-un ocean și spune-mi să nu înot.
Rămân aici, nu plec,
Nu plec.
și chiar dacă mă leg,
You are listening to Radio Romania International. Focus on Romania. The future starts today.
Hello and welcome to The Future Starts. Today I am Călin Coțoiu. Their content has the appearance of news, which the information within is not, but sometimes is partially true. We are talking about fake news, a technique for disinformation, and sometimes outright manipulation. This has become a phenomenon amply studied by the scientific community. They propagate quickly, mainly online, which makes them even more dangerous. This is also because these fake news are very easily believed to be real by an audience that is not educated about them. We talked about this with communication expert Bogdan Oprea, who publishes on fake news and online misinformation.
A vizat, în primul rând, în a înțelege că nu orice are formă de știre are și conținutul plin de acuratețe.
Not educated, meaning that first they have to understand that not any form of news has accurate journalistic content. This is something that the public at large started understanding better in the last few years. Fake news is disinformation. Here we have several concepts, but two of them are most important: intentional and non-intentional disinformation. The English language actually has different concepts for them. Disinformation proper, meaning intentional erroneous information with the intent of misleading someone, and misinformation, which is unintentional. We could even call it journalistic mistakes. We can also talk about malinformation, when you disclose publicly information about someone, accurate information, but which is not meant to be made public. Something about a person's personal life, which brings prejudice to that person. Here we can include leaks. We saw the scandals about the work emails of Hillary Clinton when she was U.S. Secretary of State, not meant for the public. We also saw the information about French President Macron. All information that can harm a person once it is made public. These are probably the most often used techniques in online disinformation. But we have to understand that in addition to disinformation, there is also manipulation online, and not only. And the techniques are innumerable. Communication expert Bogdan Oprea points out that there is a market for fabricating fake news, just as there is a market for fake links or a market for online signatures. If you want to get signatures, A simple search gets you to companies that sell the signatures you need. What contributes to the success of fabricated news is that they rely a lot on emotional responses, a fact which is exploited by manipulators. The present information ecosystem was not created for disinformation, but social networks allow the monetization of emotional responses. Predictive psychological profiles can be created, which uncover electoral options, for instance, allowing manipulation by fake news in voting. An idea gaining terrain for the future is that what will make a difference in elections will no longer be the ideas that the candidates put forth in campaigns. Rather, psychometric profiling will distribute fake news individually, leading to an information war in which artificial intelligence plays an important role. We asked Bogdan Oprea who stands to gain from fake news.
De multe ori, știrile false sunt construite strict pentru vizualizări, așa numitul clickbait, titlul acela spectaculos.
A lot of times, fake news is just clickbait, glaring headlines meant to be visualized. All you need to do is click on them, which is registered, and brings in publicity messages. A lot of people create interest groups, either individuals or companies, which create fake news simply to make money from advertising. In the most dramatic, the worst cases, vested interests are behind them, not just financial gains. Some serve political and geopolitical agendas seeking to manipulate large masses of people, change the people's positions towards certain issues in order to destabilize democratic societies. And we can see many examples of so-called successes where fake news and disinformation were successful and brought a lot of harm. We can look at Brexit. We can see disinformation campaigns that cause street protests and victims. So fake news has very strong effects. Behind them are all sorts of interest groups. And in order to stop this, we have to understand that they are out there, and we have to get antibodies, meaning we have to get to know fake news from real news. That was communication expert Bogdan Oprea. But what is there to do? First of all, it is important to get our information from safe traditional sources which have stood the test of time. The next thing needed is critical thinking, according to Bogdan Oprea. In his opinion, social media, the explosion of fake news and disinformation spread by them, have to be countered by the traditional press, but only if they evolve. You have been listening to The Future Starts Today.
Next on Radio Romania International, broadcasting from Bucharest. Foreign student in Romania.
Hello and welcome to our feature profiling people who choose to study or live in Romania. Sudan is a beautiful country in East Africa, crossed by the world's biggest river, the Nile. That is the home country of Sama Abdallah Ibrahim Mohammed. She is a future PhD candidate at the Iași Faculty of Psychology and Education Sciences. The young woman is preparing to soon wrap up her preparation year, learning Romanian at the Faculty of Letters with the Alexandru Ioan Cuza University in the same Moldavian city. First, we asked her why she chose Romania.
Anul trecut am obținut o bursă în România, o bursă oferită de
Last year, I got a scholarship to Romania, offered by the Ministry of Education here. I discovered it on the internet, then I went and applied at the Romanian embassy in Khartoum. I thought that studying and living in Romania would be wonderful, and I discovered a new country and a new culture. Sama Mohammed made herself at home in Iași, made new friends, and made progress in her study of Romanian.
Sunt foarte fericită și norocoasă că sunt aici în România, deoarece
I am very happy and lucky to be here in Romania because the education is very good, and my teachers are very friendly, organized, and industrious. The language is neither hard nor easy. I like in Romania the natural landscapes, the people, and the traditional clothing. I like a lot traditional Romanian food and music. We also asked Sama how she spends her free time.
Hobby-urile mele sunt cititul, călătoria și explorarea diferitelor culturi.
My hobbies are reading, traveling, and exploring different cultures. My favorite author is Stephen Harvey. I also traveled to Kenya and Malaysia. This year, I also traveled a bit about Romania. I took friends to Brașov and Bucharest. I like Romania. I feel good here. Iași is a safe and quiet city. I love the botanical garden here. I made friends from different countries. I also have a Romanian friend. It was one of the great things that happened here. In Sudan, at the University of Khartoum, Sama Mohammed got both an undergraduate and a graduate degree in psychology. She has been a lecturer there for almost 7 years. She took part in seminars, training sessions, and conferences, such as the International Association of Muslim Psychologists Conference in 2011 at the International Islamic University in Malaysia. Starting this autumn, Sama Mohammed will start a PhD at the Iași Faculty of Psychology and Education Sciences. Her research project focuses on the role of educational electronic games in developing civic values in students of the Khartoum district. In the end, she told us that after getting her PhD in Romania, she plans to get a good job where she could make positive changes in society. She wants to make changes wherever she is needed. She wants to be a psychologist either in her country or in Romania, and she would love to work with young people in schools.
Foreign students in Romania. Next in this program, sports.
Welcome to Sports Flash with me, Eugen Nasta. First, it's news from the ongoing tennis tournament in Roland Garros. Irina Begu and Nadia Podoroska have advanced to the women's doubles semi-finals. In the quarter-finals, the Romanian-Argentinian pair defeated the Croatian-American pair made of Petra Martic and Shelby Rogers 6-3, 4-6, 6-2. For Irina Begu, it is the second semi-final she plays as part of a Grand Slam tournament. We recall that in 2018 at the Australian Open, Begu paired up with a fellow Romanian, Monica Niculescu. In the semi-final, Begu and Podoroska faced the US-Polish pair made of Bethany Matek-Sands and Iga Swiatek. In the quarter-finals, Matek-Sands and Swiatek outclassed Daria Jurak of the Czech Republic and Slovenia's Andrea Klepak 6-3, 6-2. In the first leg of the National Men's Basketball League final on Wednesday, UBT Cluj-Napoca secured a 73-62 home win against CSU Oradea. In the third quarter of the match, UBT Cluj-Napoca secured their advantage on court and had a laid-back win afterwards. Host team's top basketball player was Donata Starovic of Lithuania, who scored 26 points and succeeded 6 rebounds. The guest team star was Cătălin Batu, with 18 points scored and 5 rebounds. The final is played following the best-in-5 teams system, while the second leg is scheduled in Cluj-Napoca on June the 11th. Romanian League One teams have begun their training ahead of the upcoming domestic football season. Title holders CFR Cluj met their new head coach Marius Șumudică, who earlier this year replaced Edward Iordănescu. The latter manager took CFR all the way through to winning the title, which is the 4th consecutive title for CFR Cluj. 50-year-old Șumudică has been free of contract since March the 4th, when he parted company with Turkish club Rizespor. Ahead of the UEFA Champions League preliminary matches, CFR will be on a training stage in Austria, where they will play a string of friendly games against Bulgaria's Ludogorets Razgrad, Russian team Dynamo Moscow, and Hungary's Lipes Budapest. And that was Sports Flash. You can also access our sports items at rri.io and on Facebook.
Listening to Radio Romania International.
Coming up next in the program, here is truly Romanian. I'm Eugen Nasta. For today, we have prepared a fine choice of songs from Maramureș in northern Romania. Our opener is a fine song performed by Florentina and Petre George, a famous traditional music duet. Florentina and Petre George have made one of the longest lasting duets since they have been singing together since 1991. Next up in the program is yet another song performed by Florentina and Petre George. Florentina and Petre George have prepared their children for the musical career. The boy is an oboe player, while the girl is a violinist. Coming up next in the program, here's another beautiful song from the repertoire of Florentina and Petre George, a song praising the beauty of the traditional hair-swirl dance of Maramureș. program continues with another talented traditional music vocalist from Maramureș, Angelina Timișlungu. Here is a very popular song from her repertoire. Angelina Timișlungu shot to fame in the mid-1980s when she won an important traditional TV musical contest. Next up in the program, here is yet another beautiful song performed by Angelina Timișlungu. Angelina Timișlungu's musical career spans more than 3 decades. To a great extent, her repertoire is made of songs she herself collected in the field research she conducted in her native Maramureș. We end truly Romanian with a fine love song performed by Angelina Timișlungu.
Next in this broadcast, stay tuned for The Book Club.
Welcome to our series dedicated to Romanian literature with me, Cristina Mateescu. Today we're going to introduce you to a popular book for children written in verse and called Apolodor, which has delighted generations of Romanian children since it was first published in the late 1950s. But first about a new radio staging of a play by Romanian-born playwright Matei Vișniec. So stay tuned. Matei Vișniec is Romania's perhaps most frequently staged contemporary playwright, especially in France, where he has been living since 1987, writing his plays in French. Decomposed Theatre, a collection of short pieces he wrote in the early 1990s as part of a modular play, was staged as a radio drama by Trafica Europe Radio, a radio station dedicated to European literature. It's a radio theatre series featuring European works translated into English and adapted for the radio. The concept behind Decomposed Theatre is that the monologues and dialogues making up the play are like elements of architecture. They can be reassembled in different ways. Each piece is like the fragment of a shattered mirror, while the play is the journey to restore the original object. Vișniec was born in a small Romanian town in 1956 and grew up under an increasingly dictatorial communist regime during a period characterized by shortages of food and other essential products, the restriction of civil freedoms, and a crackdown on any form of dissent. His early plays, written in the tradition of Samuel Beckett and Eugene Ionesco, reflected this grim reality in a way that exposed its absurdity.
When I discovered the world, I discovered that I was living in an absurd world. In effect, when I read for the first time Ionesco and Beckett and Kafka, they helped me to understand who I am, where I live, and what are my opportunities. In fact, reading the absurd theater, reading these authors, they gave me a sort of instrument to understand the world. And for me, the history was absurd in my country, not the literature of Ionesco or Beckett. They offered me only keys to understand my world.
In this world, literature and the arts provided both the only possible space of freedom and the means of resistance. In Vișniec's view, the true artist is both someone who produces great art or literature and who is subversive.
Poetry and literature really was a sort of source of oxygen at that moment. And when I went to Bucharest to study history and philosophy, I really understood that literature was a sort of cultural resistance. It was a sort of way to say nobody can crush our brain entirely because we can defend us. Little by little in Bucharest, I discovered that theater, more than novels or than poetry, was a space of resistance because people, living people in front of living actors, used to make a sort of complicity. And every show, every play I saw in Bucharest at that moment was a sort of protestation, a sort of manifestation against the power. I understood very quickly as well that an artist has to be subversive. In fact, if he wants to be recognized as a true artist. Of course, it's much more complicated than that. I understood as well that you have to write good stories. But it was, for me, a sort of mission to bring both dimensions together, to be a good writer, but a subversive one as well.
However, while he did manage to publish his poems, all of the short plays Vișniec wrote at this time were rejected by the communist censors and were never to be staged before 1989 in Romania, when the communist regime collapsed in the bloodiest uprising in all of the Eastern Bloc at the time. In 1987, Vishniac emigrated to France, where he has been living ever since. He started writing in French, with plays like Horses at the Windows and Old Clown Wanted being staged to international acclaim. Here's Vishniac again speaking about the dominant themes of his work.
Many years after I left Romania, I still wrote about liberty, the manipulation of the people by the power, about communism as well, about utopia, about ideology, how the ideology can oppress people, even if the ideology seems to be such a very promising system of ideas.
Having left native Romania when he was in his 30s, Vishniac continued to write in both Romanian and French, something he believes gives him great artistic freedom.
My identity is the Romanian language because I discovered the word in Romanian. Then I moved to France, but when I went to France, I discovered that I was like home in France because my culture prepared, in fact, the school, the books prepared me to feel in Paris like home. Being French for me, it wasn't a sort of strange revelation. I still feel home in France, like I still home in Europe, and on this planet, in fact. Of course, I have two very strong identities because I write in two languages. And finally, the liberty which these two languages bring to me is perhaps the most important identity for me.
Vishniac's work is available in English in a collection of plays published in 2015 by Seagull Books and entitled How to Explain the History of Communism to Mental Patients and Other Plays. His play The Body of a Woman as a Battlefield in the Bosnian War was published by Aurora Metro Books in Balkan Plots in 2002, while Horses at the Window was included in the collection entitled Playwrights Before the Fall, published by Martini Seagull Center Publications in 2009. Mr. K released Vishniac's first piece of fiction to be translated into English was published by Seagull Books in 2020 in a translation by Josefina Comporani, a long-time translator of Vishniac's work into English. As promised, we'll now be looking at one of the most popular books for children in Romania, called The Book with Apollodor, written by poet Gerald Naum in 1959. Naum himself was a leading voice on the Romanian literary scene and a prominent representative of the surrealist movement. Apollodor, the main protagonist of the book, which is written in verse, is a penguin who works as a tenor for the Bucharest Circus, and who one day becomes homesick and decides to go look for his family. His journey around the world as he tries to find them is full of adventures, not to mention lots of danger.
There was a free-eating machine at the circus, and the penguin on that free-eating machine. The penguin was singing on that free-eating machine. He was singing at the circus. He was singing at the circus. He was singing at the circus with a cute little cat. He was singing at the circus with a cute little elephant. He was singing at the circus with a cute little bear. He was singing at the circus. He was singing at the circus. His name was Apollodor. He used to sing Miador, Miador, which means I miss the other penguins. Miador, Miador, I miss my mother. Miador, Miador, I miss my father. Miador, Miador, I miss my brothers. Miador, Miador, I miss the others. Miador, 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 I miss my home. Miador, 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 I miss my home. He had been singing this song for many years, but suddenly he became very sad because he started thinking of what he was singing. That made him upset. That's my home. He really missed his relatives. He missed them badly. I miss my home. And you wanted very much to see them again. The renowned Zaporodo series is yet to be published in English, but it was used as a source of inspiration for the local musician Ada Mila, who in 2011 released a CD in English based on Naum's poems. While the lyrics are not a faithful translation of Naum's book, Mina says they are in the spirit of the book. The CD came with a 16-page booklet containing illustrations of the songs and the text of the songs.
Coming up next on Radio Romania International, Simply Folk. Welcome everyone to a new edition of Simply Folk. At the microphone, your host Vlad Palcu. Today we will play for you a song from the repertoire of Daniela Condurate, a popular folk vocalist from Moldavia, northeastern Romania. Let's have a listen. And with that, our broadcast in English for listeners in Western Europe and Japan has come to an end. You can listen to our next program for Western Europe tomorrow at 5:30 hours UTC on 9660 kHz in analog system and on 7325 kHz in the DRM system. Listeners in Japan can listen to our next program tomorrow at 2200 hours UTC on 7325 kHz and 9790 kHz. We can also be heard on the internet at www.ri.ro to know more. If you have any comments or suggestions, please write an email at engl@ri.ro. Goodbye.